So welcome everyone. Today we're going to be diving into talking about UX research and design around AI-powered interfaces, which I'm sure a lot of you are across or being asked to get across, especially now that AI is kind of embedded in everything. And we need to think about things like when should we automatically change something with AI? When should we ask for user input on this, human in the loop? Thankfully, Nielsen Norman Group recently did a multi-method study on AI usability. And to help unpack those insights is Kate Moran, VP of Research and Content at NNG. And I think you actually ran a lot of this research, right? You're not just you're not just the face of this thing. You're actually
No.
yep.
Yeah, we
Um,
everybody at NNG, we all wear a lot of different hats, which is fun because that means I still get to keep my hands in research as much as I have time for.
awesome. It's cool. So Kate's going to share practical strategies for UX researchers and designers looking to optimize these experiences. If you have questions through the session, drop them in the chat. Makes it much more interesting. We will get to them. Carly's keeping track of those for us. But Kate, welcome. Love a quick background for everyone that know your background and where you're from, and a bit more about NNG, and then maybe tell us about the work you've been doing.
Yeah, sure. So I work for Nielsen Norman Group. If you haven't heard of us before, well, some people haven't. We've been around for a while, about 3 decades now. We're a very well-known UX research and design consultancy. We host lots of training events, and basically our mission is just to try to help spread the correct understanding of UX and how to make digital experiences easier for people. A major way that we do that, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, is through what we call our independent research, which is research that we found independently. Nobody pays us to do it, specifically to look into the questions that are at the top of mind for product teams these days. So any of those kind of conversations you're having where you go in circles with your colleagues and you're debating, what's the right approach in this situation, we are trying to end those as much as we can by conducting our own research, talking to lots of practitioners, and publishing those findings as much as we can for free. And we publish our free findings through nngroup.com. So we've got articles, videos, lots of training resources that are available for free. And we also sell training courses that go into depth on those things. So that's a little bit of background about NNG. I am VP of Research and Content there, which is my literal dream job because I just get to nerd out all day long with other UX nerds and, think about what we want to research and then go make it happen and help other people learn how to do research and design. So it's a fun job. And lately, a big area of focus for us has obviously been AI. A lot of those conversations that maybe you and your colleagues are having where you go in circles about what's the right approach. Generally these days that has something to do with AI, whether it's using it in your day-to-day work, which we've been investigating and publishing on that side of things, or it's trying to design AI products or features. So that side of it is kind of what we're going to talk about today because we've been doing multi-phase research. We actually started researching how users, consumers, kind of regular people who aren't like us, nerds in the tech industry, how they're interacting with AI chats and AI features, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. We've been doing that since 2023. And this year in particular, it's been exciting to see lots of new AI features rolling out beyond our little tech bubble. So we're seeing things like Amazon, TripAdvisor, lots of these like consumer Best Buy, consumer level things start to get AI features. And so that's really interesting to see how that's impacting user behaviors and preferences. I miss anything there,
Awesome.
Ned?
I think you covered most of it. Uh, you covered a high level, I guess the why behind it, right? Which is more like this is what you do. You get, but was there any particular trigger that was like I've got to go and do this particular study? You were driven crazy by something, or more like you felt like it was fertile ground to go and look at these incumbents in many ways, right? You could have looked at the brand new
Mhm.
cutting edge stuff, and it's still cutting edge, but it's larger incumbents you're focusing on. Like, yeah, anything there.
Yeah, there's a so why like this year in particular are we sort of doubling down on this consumer level
Mm, mm,
research, kind of seeing how like regular people are interacting with AI? Because up until fairly recently, a lot of AI products have been targeted at people like us, people who are very tech savvy, who have at least like a high level understanding of what AI is and what it does. But since 2023, but even more so now, AI has been going mainstream. Like we're seeing more and more people who are not tech savvy, who do not have that depth of understanding, who are using ChatGPT every day, who are encountering AI features, Gemini features in, Google.
mm,
So it's exciting to see whenever there's like this shift in technology, we like to look and see how that's changing people and how people are reacting to it. And while to us, maybe people who have been thinking about and reading about and studying AI for the last several years, this maybe doesn't feel so new to us anymore. Like basic things like AI chats may not feel so new to us. I'm here to remind you, they are very new to your users still. Even
mm,
those
mm,
users who are more like AI power users, they're still not aware of like that deeper layer of like how these tools work. They're still figuring out how they should be interacting with them. So we're starting to see like anytime there's a change in designs or there's a change in technology, we see that people react to that in some ways. And sometimes that's by developing their own interaction strategies. So, like, for example, one of the things, I have a couple of slides I'll show you guys today, just
yeah,
visual
great.
aids. Um, so, for example, this was one of the first findings that we discovered in 2023 when we started studying how regular people were using AI products. And at that time, we were specifically studying AI chats and tools like Midjourney. So this was still kind of more cutting edge tech people. And this was one of the strategies that we learned that people are employing. We call this accordion editing. So this is where you're working iteratively with an AI chat conversational UI, and you're expanding out from an initial request. So you're saying, give me more examples of this, dive deeper, or you're condensing. So you're shrinking down. You're saying, okay, narrow, you gave me 18 options, give me the top three. So this kind of push and pull between like getting more information and more detail out of the system and then condensing down, reducing. So we're studying these kinds of behaviors. And in 2023, this was the kind of stuff that we were seeing a lot of because we were still studying, if we look at the diffusion of
Mm,
innovations bell curve. If you're not familiar with this, this is from Everett Rogers. This kind of shows how roughly new innovations, whether that's like the internet or like smartphones or AI, how it tends to distribute and be adopted throughout a population. We're still very much like in this phase here, where like lots of people are starting to use AI in various ways, but this is by no means filtered out to everyone. And that might be surprising to hear again, because we've been thinking about and talking about AI for a long time.
mm.
But so as a new technology starts to expand out through a population, we're going to see more of these shifts, more of these new behaviors being developed, and more of these preference changes. So that is, in not a very small nutshell, why we're studying this stuff.
Awesome. And so, like, maybe you can talk to me about the more about the methodology that you used. I know you used mixed methods and maybe the audience before we rip into some of the major findings. And
Yeah.
any changes from that to 2023 things. Sounds like you're getting away from the early adopters, looking at, the late majority. Yeah, any more you can share on
hmm
that?
Yeah, we are starting to, well, okay, and this is kind of the second part of why we're studying now is now we're seeing more products. So the part of it is more products are being available and to consumers, but then also the variety of design implementations is starting to proliferate. So we're not just seeing
Mm,
here's a chat. Like
mm,
that's interesting. There are interesting design patterns to unpack around that, and that's part of where like the accordion editing, concept came from. Um, but we're seeing more and more of move back away from conversational UI and more towards traditional UI. So having different design elements that people interact with in various ways, exposing more of what's happening beneath the system to users. So for example, if anyone started off using Midjourney in the early days, it was just basically a command line interface
Mm.
in Discord. Now it has a whole UI. It has like little sliders and labels and things. So this is where more of our skill set as like UX folks becomes more and more critical.
That's awesome.
I mean, you could still use it, Dominique. You could still use it in Discord if you want to, and I still do from time to time. But anyway, methods. You asked me about methods. So we are throwing pretty much everything at these studies. So we, just for some context, we at Nielsen Norman Group, we're a very small company. We have about 35-ish people right now. That tends to surprise people because we write a lot. We like produce a lot for how small we are. And so we tend to focus more on qualitative research. That's sort of our bread and butter. That's what we're known for. That's what we're really, really good at. We have done some quantitative surveys to try to like quantify and understand scale. For example, like how various UX related professions are using AI. You know, we've done surveys where we've asked like, are you using it for writing? Are you using it for ideation? Blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, we're doing qualitative research, largely for this kind of research where we want to see like how are people interacting with AI. We're doing usability testing. So, for example, we're gearing up for a new phase of this research project that's going to kick off in a couple of weeks, where myself and some of my research team, we're going to be studying the ways that people find and collect information with AI tools. So when people are
Mm.
searching on Google and the AI snippet comes up, or when that AI mode tab is available, what are people doing? You know, are they choosing to interact with those features, to read them? When they do interact with them, what do they think about them? You know, how
Mm.
are they checking sources? I'll tell you, they're probably not. Just based on previous information seeking studies that I've run. But so we're looking to see how are people interacting with these things? What are they saying about them? We're doing a little bit of interviewing with that as well. So we'll ask follow-up questions like, what did you think about that information? And we're looking to hear people say things like, yeah, I think that was, you know, pretty useful, or I got my answer, or that was pretty easy, those kinds of things. Just sort of like unpacking what's going through people's heads. In addition to that, we're doing diary studies. So that is kind of a collection of
Mm.
surveys over a longer period of time. So for example, we're going to be looking at how people are using AI and smart home devices, like how they're using those AI-enabled devices in their homes. And that's a method that tends to be more valuable when you are
Mm.
looking to see how people are doing these like smaller, not quite micro interactions, but like smaller interactions in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, awesome. That's cool. So pretty broad, and sounds like almost like a series of studies within this. It's not just
Yeah.
some of the
I don't
examples I
even
think
know
you've
if I
given.
could, I don't even know if I could call it a multi-phase study. It's more like a major research initiative that's taking us and will continue to take us several years.
Cool, amazing. And so one of the major findings that I saw was that a big challenge people have is first even discovering these features. Like, why do you think there's
Yes.
this like disconnect between the products and the design teams and consumers when it comes to AI?
Yes, absolutely. So, let me like back up a second and say like let me address something that sometimes disappoints people when they come to NNG and they're like, tell us how to design AI things. And we have to be like, you design them like you would design anything else. That might be disappointing, and sometimes people are like, what? But AI is like revolutionary. We've never had anything like this before. That's true. But that was also the case when we had mobile devices, you know, when those were new and
Mm,
shiny.
mm,
It was also the case when we had Flash plugins. And just like back in the early days of the web, when everybody was trying to cram Flash plugins into their designs without any purpose, or like thinking, why would someone want to interact with this? That's not going to result in a very good experience. That's not going
mm,
to be a very
mm,
good design. So while this is a new technology, there are some of those fundamental things that are just going to continue to be true, which is like if you want to know how people react to something, test it with them. If you want to design something that
mm,
people really want, understand who those people are and how they work and what they need, and then create something that solves a problem for them. So that is step one. Like, that's not even a findability, discoverability issue. That is just if you build something nobody wants to use, they're not going to build it. They're not going to use it, even if they can find it.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's
mm, mm,
step one. Step two, once you have something that is actually valuable, and Amazon is such a like useful case study for this because they're doing some things that for the most part I think are some really solid design choices, and in some cases not so solid with the way that they're integrating AI, at least in their US um, storefront. I don't know, from what I've heard, some other regions are not getting these kind of early AI features just yet. But yeah, let's look at Amazon as an example of this. So this is Amazon's Rufus, which is their branded name for their AI chat that's integrated in various ways throughout the UI on their website and also their mobile app. This is an example of a feature that has value. When we tested this with users, when people saw it, when they interacted with it, when they used it as part of their shopping experience, they really enjoyed it. They really appreciated it. So they were able to ask Rufus questions like, help me find a pair of sandals that I can walk around on my trip
mm,
to Bangalore in. They were able to ask those kinds of complex information-seeking questions. And Rufus, being an AI chat that is scoped, so it's sort of smaller in size, it's not just for, like it's not like ChatGPT. You can't ask it to make, I don't know, a poem. You can't ask it to write you a poem
mm.
about sandals. But
Sandals.
so it's scoped. It knows that it's a shopping assistant, and so it behaves that way. It'll do things like it will pull up some options and explain why you might want those options and include links to those options. It can suggest accessories, things that might go well with whatever it is you're shopping for. It prevents you from needing to, like, let's say in this example here, ceiling medallions. I was shopping for ceiling medallions. I live in a very old home,
Mm,
but ceiling medallions are expensive. So sometimes I buy plastic ones and put them on my ceiling. So anyway, shopping for something like that, which is kind of complicated, kind of niche. If I was trying to figure out what size ceiling medallion do I need for my specific physical space, like an interior design question like that. Typically, I would go to Google, search, try to find like an interior design blog and comb through that. Instead, I can ask Rufus for some guidance and it can provide an answer. Very, very smart for Amazon. It makes shopping less cognitively difficult, reduces the need to leave their website, which is good for them. They
mm,
want to keep you here. They don't want you to go search on Google for a ceiling medallion and find one that's on a different website and buy it from them. So anyway, so the value's there for both the business and the user. However, very few of our participants proactively were able to find Rufus. Now, okay, so this is where I have to be like, let's think about basic design. What if this wasn't AI? Where do you normally see a chat in an interface? Like, if you want to find a chat in an interface, where do you see it, Ned?
Bottom right. It's that big button somewhere.
Bottom right. Why do you know that? Why does everybody in the
It,
chat know that?
we've been trained it for years and years. It's been there forever for your
Exactly.
support. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So AI, like
Flippy.
fresh, Clippy. Yes, yes. Honestly, yes. I love the amount of Clippy jokes about AI. Um, so that's a great example of yes, AI is this shiny new exciting technology, but people are still people, and we have been trained on these patterns through continual use of the internet over decades in some cases. So we have to leverage existing patterns as much as possible when designing this very new cutting edge technology. So that's just like an unforced error that Amazon made by including on a
Mm,
desktop where there's a lot of screen space. And if you use Amazon at all, there's a lot of stuff competing for your attention in
mm,
Amazon.
mm, mm,
So that that location alone feels like a design mistake that was not necessary if they really
mm,
wanted people to use this. I actually looking at this, like trying to think through why would they make it this way? I was like, are they trying to hide it? Is it like
mm, mm,
expensive for them
Mm,
to
mm.
offer. So they're trying to hide it. So that is an issue. What else is an issue here? Like imagine that you couldn't see this little lower chat box. You could only see Rufus and that icon. And somebody can come off mute if you want to tell me, like, what's wrong with that?
What is Rufus? What's a Rufus?
What is Rufus? We don't know who Rufus is. Why is
Mm,
it branded that way? Like, you could have called
mm.
it Alexa. You already have a smart
Right.
persona that you created. Like, and
Mm,
yeah, we don't know what this icon is, and neither do users. So it's like a collection of bubbles. They're like chat bubbles that are sort of reminiscent of the Sparkles icon, which also still is not very meaningful to consumers because they haven't really
mm.
been exposed to it, yes, yet. Dominique says, love throwing shade on this. Well, okay, I am
Hmm.
throwing some shade, but I'm just wondering like why make those mistakes when there is so much value in this as a product, an AI product that you're offering people. It's in context, it's appropriately scoped. You do not have to be a prompt engineer to ask Rufus a question and get something valuable from this. So anyway, so
That's great.
that's a good example of like a big like challenge faced in this particular design. However, if we let me like pop over to another
Yeah.
slide here. If we look at some of the other design mistakes that Amazon has made, um, we can see other discoverability issues. And just for context, if anybody's never heard that word, discoverability, it's that situation where you're browsing on a website or an app and you see something you didn't expect to find, like an AI chat. You maybe didn't expect Amazon to have an AI chat, but you notice that it does have one. Anybody notice anything weird about this? This is on the Amazon again, this search bar with
Mm.
these keyword suggestions below.
There's these chat ones, the last three.
Yes.
Is that
Yes. So there are these bottom ones. These are actually triggers that will then open Rufus. So this is another way to get to Rufus.
oh,
Any design issues you see with that that would maybe make it less noticeable if that's not what you were looking for. Yeah, it blends in. The icons even look
mm,
similar. Like at first
mm,
glance, you may not even notice that these are here, except that these are
mm,
full sentence questions, which is weird. Yeah, so there's a couple issues here.
mm,
There are some kind of, I hate to say this, but like rookie design mistakes that are being made, like missed opportunities to leverage existing patterns to increase recognizability. But also, what's happening is people don't expect AI things to show up in places like this. They've never seen that before. They don't expect it to be there. And people remember are moving quickly. We tend to look at our designs and like really memorize them and think deeply about every detail. You don't do that when you're using a product, and neither do your users. They're just moving quickly, trying to get something done. So the odds that
mm,
someone is going to be typing and having their focus up here and trying to think, what are my keywords? What am I looking for? What do I want in a pair of headphones? And will also happen to look all the way down here and put together, ah, yes, that's the weird icon that I saw next to that thing called Rufus. It's not happening.
mm,
It's just not
mm.
going to happen.
I'm so curious with this some of this stuff where do you ever go and talk to the actual creators behind this stuff? And I ask this question because I feel like there are probably some decisions they've had to make. If we were to go back to the previous screen
Sure.
with the bottom right button, for Rufus, that could make sense, but I also associate that with support. And this kind of isn't really a support thing, e.g., I need to return something, I need to do, and maybe
Mhm.
that will come one day, it will become like that. This is really more around your shopping assistant. And so,
Which actually, can we pause there and say, how valuable would that be? If anyone has ever tried to return something to Amazon,
oh my God,
the
it's a freaking
hoops
nightmare.
oh my
It's
God, the like
disastrous.
you can
Yeah,
get stuck in a loop and not be able to get out. Can they
totally.
just use their AI to fix that problem? That'd be
I,
great.
I
Anyway,
I pray that they're working on something like that. But I think the dev effort versus design thing, I think that's an interesting question. But I'm just also fascinated about these sort of trade-offs where they're like, look, we wanted to
sure.
do that because the other thing I think about is like the organizational willpower that exists. And these aren't
Mhm.
user problems, so let's not make them user problems. But just like there's the thing behind the thing. There's this great podcast called Song Exploder, where they talk to the artists about how a song came
Yeah.
about and they just break it all down. And I kind of want to see that for Rufus or every little piece.
Totally.
Um,
I do too. So we are sometimes able to speak to the teams that are behind some of these designs. For example, 2024, we spent some time talking to Henry Modisette, who's I think he's now the CDO, but at that time he was the head of design at Perplexity. So sometimes we talk to these companies
oh,
and like hear those backstories. And I do want to say, like, let's give every designer, every product team some grace that we
right.
don't know what the pressures that they were working under were and what the trade-offs they had to consider were. But what I do know as a person who's testing this with Amazon customers is people are not finding it. So whatever that context
Yes.
was, and
Yes.
we can give them
Yes.
grace for that, this is the output and this is the problem. Um, However, yeah, there may have been some trade-offs there. That's why I was like, are they doing this on purpose? Are they trying to hide it on purpose?
Well,
But then if you look at their mobile design, they're clearly not. They added an entire, again, this is an unlabeled
mm,
icon. We don't know what that means. Even if the label Rufus
yeah.
was there, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be that great. So I don't think they're trying to hide it. I think they are trying to push people towards this.
Yes. Well, the other I think about is the in the example of the search results, we have these bottom three things, which are more like you can ask it a question. I'm like, how much of this is actually slowly revealing it to people versus shoving it in their face?
Hmm.
Is actually strategically, we want to train people that they could ask these questions in this box, but it's just going to take us time to go and adjust and bring people along for the ride. Um,
Sure. Yeah,
Again,
and I
maybe
think
giving too much of the benefit of the doubt to the
but let's consider that anyway as a thought experiment, right? Let's just say
sure,
that that's the case. And
great.
Asha in the chat is making a similar point, thinking about this distribution of innovations. So yes, it is true, and so this is part of what's so interesting to a nerd like me and my colleagues at NNG. What's interesting is, yeah, there is this curve. This is going to change over time. We actually just,
Mhm.
I think this week or last, just published an update to our. We had an article that came out back when the hamburger menu was first introduced. Do you remember that, Ned? When that was like controversial?
Wild, wild. But it gives you a sense of the legacy of NNG.
Yeah. Well, okay. So at the time that that research was conducted, which I've been at NNG for 10 years and that predated me by a few years.
Hmm.
So that kind of dates it a little bit. But at the time that that research was conducted, it wasn't good for people. Like a lot of users, especially
Mm,
people who were like more on this later side,
mm,
had
mm.
no idea what it meant. It is still an issue for some populations. Like for certain
Huh.
populations and groups of people, it is still an issue. And it is still an issue if you're using a hamburger menu on a huge, like my screen in front of me right now is this big. I don't
Right.
need a hamburger
Yep.
menu on a
No.
website. Like
Give me the full
expose that.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so yes, this does change over time, and we do anticipate that these things are going to change. However, it's just unnecessary cognitive work when you give some, and we this again predates AI. If you are introducing a new feature and you give it a weird icon that no
Yes.
one's ever seen before, and you invent a fun like branded name to give it
Mm.
anthropomorphized personality that nobody needs or asked for, you are
Yes.
introducing unnecessary friction.
Yes. Great. Love that. Um, and so, I guess somewhat related to this is that you also found that users have this high level of trust in the AI,
Yes.
even when they maybe should be a little bit more skeptical. Like, what are the biggest risks associated with that, and like, how did that serve us for you?
So, okay, I think that's a larger question that we as society will be answering over the next decade. I have some insight on that, but this is also something that just predates AI. This is not an AI problem. This is a human psychology problem that AI is sort of uniquely positioned to be a bit
Hmm.
problematic with. So if we think
Hmm.
like, let's forget AI. Let's go back to just thinking about the early days of search. Since the early days of Google, we have seen something that we call Google gullibility, which is people's natural inclination to trust answers
Mm.
that they find on Google. Or, even before Google, people had this credulity for things they found on the internet. And some people attribute this to laziness. They say like people are lazy and that's why they just trust whatever they see online. Um, I like to frame it as efficiency because if you think about the quantity, the sheer amount of information online, if you were to go, look up information about mortgages, like let's say you're a young person who's, going to buy your first house and you need to learn about mortgages. If you went online and read everything that there is to read about mortgages online, you would be reading until you died. So
Mm,
people are busy. We have very busy lives. It's reasonable to go online and look for an answer to a question that is good enough. We call that
mm,
satisficing. I'll type that in the
mm, mm, mm,
satisficing. Um, so that's where you're just finding something that will suffice, that will satisfy a minimum threshold that you have for credible information. So that was an issue before AI, where people would see, especially in like the featured snippet era, when you would, I mean, you still see these on Google, but when you would search for something and you would see at the top like an excerpt from a website, sometimes that excerpt would not be accurate. It would not give you factual information, or it would
mm,
give you, like, say you were looking for the population of Croatia, you would be given a number, but it would actually be taken from a page that where it's out of context and it's the population for something else, some other country. Like, there are these problems with people trusting easy information that they find online that have always existed. Now, when you add in AI, that does add kind of another layer on top of it. One thing that really alarms me, this is maybe more background information than we need, but I was at a yoga retreat last month, and so I was with a bunch of people that don't work in my industry. So I got out of my tech bubble for a little bit. They started talking about AI. One woman told me that she was using AI as her therapist, which makes me nervous. There's a lot of research findings that have just been published this month from academic institutions and psychology researchers finding that there are some really scary potential side effects to using AI chat as your therapist. But anyway,
mm,
average people don't know that it can lie to them. They don't
mm,
understand what a
mm,
hallucination is. If you have
mm,
that background in your understanding and you know what AI can do for you and what it can't do, how much you should trust it, how much you should be skeptical and double check its work, then AI is a great information seeking tool. I do think it's like revolution. I studied information science for my undergraduate and master's degrees, and I think it's amazing. However, there is this danger of people trusting it to do things for them, to give them answers, to do math problems for them. Like, unless it's a reasoning model, it's just not going to do very well. So there is an issue with this credulity. Now, some of that is like a larger psychological, sociological problem, but we do have some control over that as the people who are designing these things and putting them in products with the way that we present and message those those products that we're delivering to people.
mm. The analogy, I think the Google analogy is very good. The other analogy I think about, and some of these things are inconsequential, right? The population of Croatia, you get that wrong, like the worst thing that could happen is you don't win the pub trivia on Tuesday night.
Right, exactly.
The analogy that I keep coming back to is Wikipedia. Is look, in high
Yes.
school, we were told you can't reference Wikipedia, and like Wikipedia lies to you, and it can still now. There are still tons of profiles and facts out there on Wikipedia which are incomplete or incorrect for various reasons, right? Things have changed, or someone's being malicious. And look, it's got an editing system, but you read it and you think, now for most things, it's fine. Again, the population of Croatia, all good. But if you're going to make a decision, like, should I,
Unless you're making some governmental decision for Croatia. Like,
I
right.
guess so, but even then, you would hope that, again, the weight of that decision, and it's the same with like when should we run research and when should we not? It's a similar sort of characterization. I think that's earlier we were talking about and there's three populations of people when they think about AI. There's the 10% of people that are madly for it, blindly for it. It's the best thing in the world, and anyone that's against it should die. Then there's the 10% of people that are like, AI is unethical and it shouldn't exist. And then I think there's the 80% in the middle that are like still trying to figure it out, and they're a bit more nuanced in that conversation.
Yes.
Um,
And I'm proud that NNG, since the early days of 2023, when the hype and the doomsday, like those extremes
mm,
were so loud, since that time, we have really tried to take this middle approach where we're like, it's a new technology. It's so funny. I was literally just having this conversation with Carly before we started this webinar. We were talking about Wikipedia as well. Um, it's a new technology. The internet brought a lot of good things for
Yes.
humanity and a lot of bad things. And also, even if like we could have foreseen the bad things and we somehow collectively decided that that outweighed the good things, we would not have been able to stop it from happening. I think this is the
Right.
era we're in. So what
Right.
we have to try to do is act as ethically as possible. The problem is like it depends on who you are and what you're working on. We don't all have the ability to go to ChatGPT and be like, or OpenAI and be like, hey, this is how you need to design, ChatGPT. We do have some amount of control over the products that, we are working on. And so within whatever that sphere of influence is that you as an individual have, what can you do to try to ensure that the technology is being used to its strengths? There are certain things it's really good at and certain things it's not good at.
Mm.
And being presented in a context where that damage is not going to be
Mm.
severe, and also
Yes.
so it solves a problem for people.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Which, to your early point, is the same as when we're designing any system or any
Exactly, I
software.
know.
Not necessarily, this is all just the same sort of thing as repeating. And so I guess to
I know.
shift
It's so,
gears then a
and
little bit,
people sometimes are like, oh, what? It's just like designing anything else. Like they're disappointed to hear that. I'm like, why would you
I
think
know,
it
be
would
like,
be different?
sorry. Well, I
Technology
think,
changes. People don't really, not in like fundamental ways.
yes, it's funny. When I hear a lot of complaints about many, many things, but this is included, it's like, I think that complaint's actually about a complaint about capitalism. I got bad
Yes.
news about you. This thing is probably going to be
Yes.
here for a little bit longer, and there's no immediate changes for it. So we can complain about it. I
100%.
agree. We can be better, but um, so um, I'm really maybe talking a little bit more onto how researchers should approach some of these challenges and like what makes AI usability testing fundamentally different from testing traditional interfaces. Um,
hmm so just to clarify, when you say AI usability testing, you're talking about usability testing AI products, not using AI to run usability testing.
I think that's
Okay,
where
good.
we'll stop. We'll come back to that. That's a whole
Yeah,
other
we're
clamshell.
gonna do a
Yeah.
separate webinar that's gonna be about
Yes, sure.
integrating AI into research. Um, so I have found it depends on what you're testing, but if it is in general, I would say the more open-ended it is. So like if we're talking about instead of like here, we can talk a little bit more about this example as well, but if it's something like this where you're testing AI generated summaries of reviews on an e-commerce site or a travel site or something like that, someplace where you have lots and lots of user generated reviews and you need this automated way to bring up a summary to help people quickly understand what the sort of consensus among customers was for this thing.
Mm,
Very narrow scope, very like simple context, and it's not going to change very much. It'll change from product to product, obviously, but the design itself, the way that this is designed, isn't going to change very much from participant to participant. With something like this, it's very similar to how you would usability test anything else. If, however, you're talking about something that's more like an AI chat, more like Rufus, maybe, where it's going to depend very much on what people are using it for, how they're phrasing what they're saying, and then also what responses they're getting back. We're still figuring this out, but I have been leaning towards over recruiting. So, one of the things that Nielsen Norman Group is famous for is advocating for what we in the old days called discount usability. And by we, I mean Jacob Nielsen. I was not around for that, but
mhm.
um, so like the traditional recommendation is if you're just trying to identify problems with a design and figure out how you can fix that for a larger population, generally testing about 5 to 8 participants per user group is sufficient. With these more open-ended, open scope, very interactive tools like AI chats, I'm leaning on doing a little bit more. So I would over recruit I would do maybe like 8 to 12 people. The reason for that is if I have the same exact person submit the same exact prompt to Rufus, that person's gonna get 2 different answers probably. They're gonna get different
Likely.
results.
Yeah.
And even more the case with something like Amazon, which as it should, Amazon Rufus changes its responses based on the person who signed in, their previous browsing and purchasing behavior. So that adds
Holy
another,
cow.
which
That's
it
great.
should. I mean, that's how you make it
Mm,
really useful, is it knows I was
sure.
searching for ceiling medallions. So it's like, Kate, would you like a ceiling medallion?
Mm, mm, mm.
Um, so that adds another layer, and that just adds kind of, if you think about variability in a data set, that adds some noise to the data. That adds like different outcomes and different situations that you're likely to see. We're not talking about like static designs that are the same from person to person. There's a lot of variability. So my instinct there is, and this is how our team is doing it, collect more data, err on the side of having more information.
Yeah, that's great. I think the only thing that I would add there is, for us in our testing, so for those people that don't know, I didn't do an intro of myself at the start. My name's Ned. I'm
Oh, right.
co-founder, CEO of Great Question. We're a customer research tool. We make it easy to do everything from recruiting the right people from your own customers or non-customers, run all the methods, whether it's interviews, surveys, and prototype tests, and share what you learn with your team. And how we're testing a bunch of these our AI service areas. Um, we have an eval dashboard where basically we allow people to go and test the actual pure prompting. It's less about the user experience. We strip away that out and say, cool, you're trying to go and synthesize this interview. What questions would you type in here to go and do that? Here's what the output is. Does this output meet your expectations? If not, tell us why, and then we'll allows us to go and adjust the prompts. And so I think that idea that sometimes actually stripping out the interface
Hmm.
makes it much easier to rapidly iterate on the prompts to go and generate the outputs to make sure that it meets the user's needs. And
Yeah,
can be
it really
cheaper than
depends.
sometimes than building the interfaces. Yeah, it depends on the problem.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're designing in the moment. If you're really trying to fine tune the system prompts and like the back end, like kind of
Yes,
cognitive architecture, essentially, then that approach makes sense. If you're trying to test, like, hey, if I call this thing Rufus, are people going to know what that is? Then
right.
then it's more
Very different.
traditional. The other thing that I think is happening and will continue to happen is I think that what we call in situ methods, I'll spell that out in the chat, in situ. That would be things like diary studies that I described at the beginning of the
Mm.
talk. Also would be things like field studies, like where you go follow somebody around in their office and see how they do their job in real life. And then also data collection, like analytics, log data, A/B testing. I think those methods they've always been important. I think they're going to become increasingly more important as we want to see, okay, what are people really using these tools for in real life? Like, what kinds of things are
Mm.
they asking?
Mm.
Is anybody clicking on those questions that we're putting at the bottom of the search suggestions? Like, that kind of stuff is going to be increasingly important.
Awesome. And so, through this research and what you've been learning, are there like common mistakes that people have when designing these experiences that we should be avoiding? Um, yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, a lot of people are not doing any user research at all. So that would be like number one problem, is that I think we talked a little bit about like what the background is that we're missing, kind of the context of a lot of design decisions. I think in many cases, unfortunately, it's not people like us who are driving the adoption of and building AI features. It could be the dev team. I think more often it's senior leadership or it's pressure from shareholders. Again, the capitalism problem you alluded to, Ned. So I think
Sorry.
that, I mean, it's not your fault. So anyway, yeah, I think that, and I have a lot of empathy for people who are stuck in that situation where you're like, damn it, I have been told I have to cram AI into this thing, and now I have
Mm,
to find a
mm, mm.
way, Clark, I have to find a way to do that. Um, and there's only so much you can do in those situations, but I think, if we come back to, for example, these like AI generated summaries. Like I would recommend really looking for opportunities like this. I think part of the reason why these AI generated review summaries work really well is because they're not pushing the AI to do something it can't do. Like unfortunately, I have seen a lot of claims being made that like, oh, You can fire your entire research team because AI can plan the research, conduct the research,
Huh.
analyze it, and generate the report. Can it make things that are shaped like those things? Yes. Are they actually sufficient to replace a human? No. But AI is really good at summarizing large amounts of text, fairly large amounts of text, and doing that pretty accurately. So like this is a good example of how to use AI for one of its strengths and do it in a way that's
Mm,
pretty low risk. You know, we were talking about risk tolerance when people are searching for information, but
mm.
also when you're using AI to surface information to customers. And I think Amazon is another example of a company that's doing this well and kind of leading, making some design mistakes, sure, but I think kind of leading in this space. One of the
Mm.
things I really like about Amazon's approach here is they have these themes that they've identified in the set of user feedback. And then if you click those and open them or tap them, you have citations. So they're sort of
Yeah,
citing where they
great.
got things from. So like, having these disclaimers that warn people, hey, this is AI, it may be inaccurate. That does kind of push the work onto the user in a way I don't love, but at least we're telling them. And then allowing them to dig deeper and find that real information that's not AI generated, that's sort of a layer deeper. Now, the problem, again, coming back to
Mm.
discovery, almost none of my
Yes.
research participants knew they could click
Yeah.
these.
No. Yeah, I think there was a discussion on this on LinkedIn the other day. Classic place to have these sort of flame wars.
Sure.
And I think two pieces here. One, I think this disclaimer is a great thing, and it's interesting actually that we don't see similar disclaimers necessarily on Google search results, right? Like you should take this, avoiding the new AI interface. You should take these with a grain of salt, and do your own research. Equally, Wikipedia doesn't have it, right? When they've got their facts on there that this is this community edited forum, and I guess we all know, built up this knowledge of it over time, which I think will be the same with AI. But we're going above and beyond with this, which I think is great with these sorts of disclaimers. And I agree that definitely references as much as possible to primary materials, just like Wikipedia, to allow you to dive deeper, to really validate it. In this case, with the reviews, to say, but what do they really say? Because the AI might have brought out, the person was clearly being sarcastic. They used the, slash s slash, sarcasm thing when they said that this was the best restaurant they've ever eaten at. And we shouldn't take it so literally.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there are definitely, I will say, I think sometimes these disclaimers are more to protect the company than they are to protect the individual. And based on what I know about how people process digital interfaces, the odds that someone's really
they're
going to pay
ignoring
much
that.
attention,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
they're
agree.
not
I
really
agree.
probably going to pay
Yep.
that much attention. So, but
Yep.
anyway, yes. I mean, these are the small things that we can be doing, trying to help people dive deeper when they want that information. That, by the way, was a common theme. I don't think a single participant just said, "Oh, I would just read this and make a decision based on this." That is not, they're not trusting the
It's one
AI to
input.
that level. Yeah, but it helps them kind of understand at a high level. Now, of course, there were issues we saw with this. In some cases, they like the summaries would use really weird, sometimes offensive language. Like in one example, a participant was looking at some technology product. I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically some reviewer had said was an older person and made a joke about how even an old timer like me can understand how to use this. And Rufus surfaced that in the summary in like a very weird, like kind of the person who encountered it wasn't an older person, but I did wonder, I was like, maybe somebody would be offended by that. The
Mm,
other issue
mm.
we've seen, so if you do have access to the US based Amazon, you can see all these different features. And if not, you can check out our article at that QR code where we kind of break this down. But they surface this also in product pages. So I thought this was really interesting. So Rufus is scoped specifically to shopping on Amazon. When you go to a product page, they had these inline searches, these inline chats, where you could ask Rufus a question specifically scoped to that product. And that's
Right.
useful. So
Very
that's
powerful.
really
Yeah.
but why is that useful? It's useful because Amazon's product pages suck because they're just so
Mm,
crowded. They have a
right.
huge inventory that they can't really police as a marketplace very well. So this is kind of a band-aid. And would it be better if the
Mm,
product information was cleaner? Yeah. The other issue here is we did see some instances of incorrect information coming out of these. So, for example, one shopper was looking for a children's toy. She couldn't find the age range that that child's toy was recommended for. So she asked Rufus. Rufus helpfully provided an age range. And then later I went back and pulled up that exact product page. I was like, let me see if I can find that age range. It was not on the product page. It was nowhere in
Oh,
there. So that was a
that's
hallucination.
scary.
And that
Yeah.
does cause some risk. I mean, especially in that context, if it had
Mm.
said, oh, yes, you can give this to a 1-year-old and it had a choking hazard,
Yes.
it's just
Yeah.
hard to
Very
predict,
dangerous.
especially at this scale, that level of risk.
Um, so this is all great. I think that the amazing thing I will say is that we've got one more last question before we throw the audience questions, but so much of this is on the Nielsen Norman Group website. So we're going to have plenty of links and send them after the fact. There's live trainings, but also just like free articles and things like that. The outputs of this research. So I encourage everyone to go and check out because it is freaking awesome. I
Thanks.
guess any,
I'm just gonna put
yeah,
this
go.
up here while we're talking.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Yeah, dive into that, please. Any smart, I've never done that before. We should totally be doing that. Any final like top takeaways for real world best practices for ensuring AI features are intuitive, ethical, and actually useful apart from this, or should we throw to the audience questions?
Well, that is a huge question. There's a lot of
I know. I'm
answers.
sorry.
And,
We've got
I
five, we've got
think
6 minutes left. Yeah.
I think like just let's all collectively take a deep breath and remember that like this is a technology like any other technology. It's developing as are people's reactions to it. I think just sort of
Mhm.
stepping back from the mania and engaging in a little bit more common sense of like, is this an appropriate use for this technology? Is this justified? Like, is this, it's expensive not only for resources, but also can be costly to run to have AI, especially on a site like Amazon, to have like AI summaries across an
Yep.
entire website. So is it justified? Is it actually going to solve a problem for the user? Is it going to be worthwhile for the business? And then from there, taking the common sense, regular approaches that you would take to any kind of design situation where you're just like immersing yourself in your customers and users' problems, figuring out how you can solve those, and then iterating on it and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's great. Um, and a great question. We're building a ton of products. There's already a ton in there. Very popular. Ask AI to go and better understand all your research outputs, generate clips and highlight reels, including citations, so that you can play back and make sure it's not hallucinating. But
Yep.
we've learned build a lot of our own design patterns through the process of like, okay, when should you do a one shot where we try and get the answer from a single prompt? When should you do a multi-shot and ask questions and say, hey, we're not clear.
Mhm.
Can you get answered? When should you do a no shot where you just go and instantly go and do the functions for the user to guide them? And there's a lot more that we are going to share as a great question as we launch more of this functionality. Just talking about the one question from the audience, because for lack of time, we'll try to answer some of these asynchronously. But what's your view on the recent proliferation of research tools that are out there? You must see so many of them. This particular
Oh
question was
yeah.
focusing on AI moderated interviewing, but it could be about synthetic users. But maybe we'll just focus on the AI moderated
Yeah,
interviewing.
don't get me started on synthetic users because you'll never get me out of here. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about AI tools for research. There are many, many of those on the market, and they have been flooding the market since 2023. I think, Ned, you and I may have had a conversation about this at some point. Like the amount of
Yeah,
times that I
maybe a year ago.
connected with, yeah, the amount of times that I connected with founders of these startups who had these really promising demos and then got my hands on it and realized, okay, this is worse than nothing. This is
Mm,
actively harmful. I mean,
mm,
situations where like in 2023, encountering one organization that has since gone under that was claiming that they could analyze usability testing recordings. I mean, even now that's not really practical. Like these systems just cannot process video streams and the vocal input
mm.
and the facial recognition and
No.
also keep in mind the context of your research questions the way that a human can. But to claim that they could do it in 2023 was just egregious. It was straight up
Mm, mm,
like
mm.
false marketing. Um, So be very, very skeptical. Don't ever just trust a demo. Always get your hands on the product before you decide to use it. Now, that said, I am pretty excited about some of the AI moderated tools out there. We are actually planning this diary study that I mentioned. I think I mentioned we're doing one soon. We're doing a lot of research. One of the
Awesome.
diary studies we're gearing up for, we're going to use Versive, which is they call
Oh,
themselves an AI interview tool. I really think about it more as like a smart survey. So you can set up these questions ahead of time and then ask follow-up question, have the AI ask specific follow-up questions. We're going to publish some guidance on that because we've already uncovered a lot of potential issues. Like if you're not careful, it'll ask really leading questions like, why didn't you like that feature? Was it for this reason? So you have to be like very careful with how you set up those studies. But anyway, that's nice. That's better than a regular static survey that can't ask follow-up questions.
um, I love that you brought up the survey thing because yeah, I think we get people get wrapped up around the idea we're going to replace UX researchers now because we've got an AI that can go and moderate these interviews. It's like it's just a survey, y'all. It's a survey that can ask follow-up questions, but you can talk to it. It's just a different interface. It's like the difference between Typeform and SurveyMonkey. Now you can chat to it and they can chat back to you, and the user can decide in many cases which way they prefer. Um, and so yeah, like it's getting a bit further away from a survey because it's smarter than a survey, but it's still a long way, I think, from replacing a human. And it depends on the use case ultimately. The
I think
classic,
it's
it
gonna
depends.
I know. We
Yeah,
love it. We love it. I think it's going to
so good.
be, we're going to end up like redefining our methods soon. We're going to have
Yes,
like,
I agree.
that's going to be its own separate method that we talk about. I
Yes.
also think like, if you have an AI facilitator that is not capable of observing what's being done in the session, but can still ask more targeted follow-up questions in an unmoderated study, that's better than a regular unmoderated study in the ways that companies have been doing them. Would I still prefer to do a moderated study? Yeah, absolutely.
Of
Would I
course.
still
Yeah.
prefer to be the person interviewing? Yes. But I know like that's not always practical. That can't always be done. As long as it's being used in the right way, I'm excited about those methods.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. But yeah, the proliferation is challenging. I think in our view is which ones are also able to go and serve the customer need, not just in a solve for the user, not asking leading questions, things like this, but empower the researcher to have control over how it's operating while still doing it with the data governance and security and all that kind of stuff, which is also really important for large
Yes.
organizations. Um,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thanks,
Just
Kate. Oh, go.
Just one quick little plug for you guys. I do love your focus. I love Great Questions focus on trying to do democratization in a controlled, responsible way at scale, because I do think that's going to become increasingly important as this narrative gets out that like, oh, AI can do your interviews for you. You don't even need researchers. So we're going to need
Yes.
more common sense applied to democratization as well.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for that. And yeah, well, when and how to use this thing. And the other thing I think about there is if everyone in your company can now run research and they can interview 1,000 people in an hour, um, your customers are about to go and get bombarded by
Oh
every
yeah.
angle with all this research, which is they don't even do anything with it. And is it structured appropriately? There's like this
Another
traffic
research
control type
question that we
situation you're in.
have, we also don't know yet how people
Thanks,
are going to
Tony.
respond to being interviewed by an AI. Like, are they going to like that? We
I
got to
mean,
find
the
out.
data I've seen on that is it's actually pretty good. I mean, in terms of when you compare it to a survey, I think the verbosity you're able to get out of folks. But yeah, I'm keen to hear what you see as well. What you see as well. All right, everyone, thank you so much. We're going to send a follow-up email. You can find Kate and Nielsen Norman Group on LinkedIn, and we'll follow up. And there's links in the chat, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks again, Kate.
Thanks, y'all.